On today's episode of Locked On 76ers, Keith and I break down game number 2, the importance of it as the Bucks come to town to open the Sixers' home schedule. We'll dive into it next. How big is this one? Right here, Locked On 76ers.
You are Locked On 76ers, your daily Philadelphia 76ers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, you are Locked On 76ers. I'm Devon Givens from 97.5 The Fanatic, radio in Philadelphia, with my partner here from the Inquirer.com Sixers beat writer, Keith Pompey. Keith, what's going on, man? Another big one tonight.
Yeah, what's poppin', D? How you been? This is a huge one tonight, right?
Yes, sir. Milwaukee Bucks come to town. Giannis, Drew Holiday. We get to see where the Sixers match up with this one. Before we get started, we want to thank everybody for making Locked On 76ers your first listen every day. And remember, Locked On 76ers is free and available on all platforms, including right here on YouTube at Locked On 76ers. After a tough loss, 126-117 in the opener on the road Tuesday night in Boston, giving up 70 points between the two All-Stars, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. It doesn't stop there. Tonight, Giannis, as mentioned, Drew Holiday, Brook Lopez, and the rest of the group, Bobby Portis, Pat Connaughton, they all come to town. Notice I did not include Chris Middleton. He is out with still recovering from off-season wrist surgery, so he's not in the lineup, but that would make him much stronger when they do get him back. But as far as how things look right now, they're still a very formidable opponent. This is their first game tonight, so the Sixers played one in the books already. The league schedule was pretty heavy on Wednesday. We'll dive into some of those games later on. Milwaukee, though, this is their first game of the season. Keith, what do they need to do, the Sixers, to get this one back, and get their first victory of the season, bouncing back after that loss on Tuesday?
You know, it's weird because when you look at it, I think they need, better execution. I also think if we're going to be real, I think some of these lineups may have to be, if not tinkered, at least there's going to have to be like a little bit better in-game adjustments to certain things. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but when you got somebody going off, you got to bring in some people that who can defend and kind of put out a little bit of fires and, right there. So, but it was the first game. It was the first game. I think that the first thing that has to happen is, and this has nothing to do with, scheme or whatever, but they say great players don't have two bad games. And I know Joel Embiid had numbers, but he wasn't his usual dominant self, right? So you look at it and you expect Joel Embiid, who's going to be a front runner for MVP. He's going to be a guy that everybody's talking about, first team all NBA discussion. Joel Embiid has to basically have a better performance. And I'm not talking, like I said, statistically, I'm talking about the eye test. Joel Embiid has to come out and be more of a dominant force in order for the 76ers to win.
Agreed. I look at it and I say it starts with the defense. They gave up 126 points in that game, as I mentioned on Tuesday. That's just way too much, even against a good basketball team. And I know the league is sped up. The speed is there, and that's fine. I like the points just like the next person. But defensively, they do have to slow things down with the Milwaukee Bucks. Different type of animal when you're talking about Giannis with how he gets his versus what we saw from the two wing players in Boston on Tuesday. So that's where I begin. Starts with the defense, slowing down Giannis, making sure they control how, he can get his. It's going to be that way. So it's just going to be, he's that good. He's going to get his. Are you going to let everybody else come in and have a big impact? We're going to talk about the bench a little bit later, Keith, you and I, of what we saw from that game and what needs to be improved in this one. We also have to talk about Giannis and Joel Embiid individually in one of the later segments also, but that's a big part of how they lost. You got the 70, yes, from those two, but you also got some big points off the bench, and where it was such a big discrepancy from the Boston bench to the Sixers. They need to step up a little bit more in this one. As far as the transition defense goes. They gave up 24 fast break points to the Boston Celtics, to their 2. Okay? 22, a plus 22 difference for the Bucks in that category. That can't happen again. And again, that's the live ball turnovers. Turnovers going to happen. And as you said, the eye test with Embiid. Embiid had very good numbers to start off the season at 26 points, 15 boards, 5 assists. Not good enough because we saw how it happened. And this one, when we talk about the fast break points and the turnovers, 14 is not a lot in an NBA game, especially game 1 of a regular season. 14 is not a lot as far as the turnovers go. But when you get 22 points off of those, that's not good. And Sixers, yes, they got 15 off the 11 mistakes that Boston had, but look at the difference in how they were. And again, the fast break points, 24-2. So yes, they got 15 points off of the 11 turnovers. 2 fast break points. Have to do better in transition when you have the opportunity to have crooked numbers, where you have the numbers advantage and have the defense scrambling and trying to figure out how to get back and slow you down. Need to be able to do that. And thirdly, Embiid and Maxey in particular have to stay out of foul trouble, because while the Sixers only lost by 9 points, we know it seemed like it was much, much more because they were down by a large margin at some point in that game. If they have any chance tonight against Milwaukee, they're going to have to be able to stay on the floor. I think to your point about what Doc Rivers wanted to do with his lineup, it got messed up a little bit with those 2 guys in foul trouble early. He may have had to bring guys in at a time where he didn't want to. And tonight, if they can stay out of foul trouble, I would really love to see how his rotations go against the Milwaukee Bucks tonight. So those are a few of the keys for me, making sure that happens. They made shots. They shot 50% from the floor, and they weren't very far behind the Milwaukee Bucks in terms of field goal attempts. 3-pointers, they made 1 more 3 than them. Free throws, we know they get to the line. James Harden was 10 for 10 or 12 for 12 from the foul line. We know they get to the foul line. It was the turnovers, Keith. It was the turnovers, the fouls that kept Maxey and Embiid off the floor, that kept them from helping have a closer game on Tuesday. And I expect that to be an adjustment tonight to make sure that they make a big emphasis on protecting the basketball, transition defense, execution, as you mentioned. And then we'll see, of course, where the bench falls in when we dive into them a little bit later.
Yes, we got to talk about that, because like the shooting percentage, the 50%, that's extremely misleading. I mean, when you factor in what the bench did. So, that's something that I'm looking forward to discussing with you.
All right. Well, you know what? Let's do that next, and we'll get to the Embiid and Giannis part later on. Keith Pompey, Devon Givens, we'll do that next. We'll talk about the bench and what they need to do, have a much better performance in game number 2 against the Milwaukee Bucks. Back here in Philadelphia, we'll tap in next right here, Locked On 76.
Let's talk about Bet Online. Bet Online is your number 1 source for betting football and the start of the new basketball season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchup, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every game. And as always, Bet Online remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information, with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. The fastest and easiest way to check on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet Online, where the game starts.
Do it today, people. Do it today. There were a lot of games last night. There are only a few games tonight, but still, do it today. All right. Welcome back to Locked On 76ers. Thanks for making Locked On 76ers your first listen every day. Now make your second listen game to game. Yes, NBA Eastern Conference, every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA, the Eastern Conference, with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA, Eastern Conference for us. There's also the Western Conference available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Keith, you had some things you wanted to say about the bench. There was a 34-11 advantage in terms of points, Boston to Philadelphia. Malcolm Brogdon, 16. Grant Williams, 15. He was perfect from the floor, 5 for 5 from the floor. That was a quiet 15 perfect from the floor performance from Grant Williams. Didn't even realize until after the game when I looked at the box that he was 5 for 5 from the floor, 3 for 3 from beyond the 3-point line for his 15 points. But they got 34 points from their bench and played solid defense. Malcolm Brogdon was very much under control in the game. Composure that he always comes into the game with. He was phenomenal in game number one. As far as the Sixers go, not much from the bench, and it is only game one. I expect this to be a very good bench unit. We know how much it has been a problem in the past for the Sixers. I still love the moves that were made to bring these players in, from Melton, Harrell, House, to add to this basketball team, but not a good start to their Sixers careers on Tuesday.
Nah, it wasn't. I mean, and the thing about it is when we look at this, right? I mean, when we look at this, this season was supposed to be different for the Sixers, with the addition of Harrell. He was a sixth man in 2020. And then they have three 3-and-D wings and DeAnthony Melton and Daniel House Jr., right? But the only difference on Tuesday night that I saw was the names on the back of the jerseys, D. Let's be real. Harrell had more fouls, 3, than points scored. He had 2 points scored. Melton had 5 points on 2 for 4 shooting, but he was a minus 13. I mean, he couldn't keep he was the backup center for the Celtics. What's his name?
Who was in there?
The kid who came from Milwaukee. Whatever.
Well, Blake Griffin was the backup for a few minutes.
But no, the guy the guy escapes me. The dude I thought who should have came to the Sixers last year from Indiana, but he kept blowing by him. Right. And then
you said the big man. You talking about Malcolm Brogdon?
No, it's Malcolm Brogdon, backup point guard, Malcolm Brogdon, right? And then House missed both of his shots. Now he did have 2 steals, but he only had 1 point, right? So it's kind of like, you're saying to yourself, what's really going on right now? George Niang had 3 points and 1 for 4 shooting. Matisse Thybulle logged just 23 minutes. His only statistic was a -1 on the floor, right? So we're looking at it where you say, okay, the Sixers starters combined for 106 points on 53.7 shooting, while the bench combined for the other 11 on just 30.7% shootings. Whereas the Celtics bench, like you said, had 34 points on 65% shooting. So when we look at it, and I'm sorry, Malcolm Brogdon, for messing your name up and going on and on, but when you look at it, it's kind of like the bench has a long way to go. Now, part of the problem could be, whereas they have to get used to that one lineup where you have 4 reserves in on the floor with James Harden. It reminded me of the Houston Rocket days where James is basically out there to score and you got guys to stretch the floor. But there were occasions where he swung the ball to certain guys, they swung it somewhere else, or they just missed wide open shots. So I think that they have to correct that. I understand it. When you're on the floor with James, you spread the floor, you let him go to work. But you have to be able to knock down shots when you're wide open. And we just didn't see that.
Those shots will fall. They'll start to fall. Again, as you mentioned, game one of the season, they will eventually start to drop for them. So I'm not too worried about it. As I said in the open there, that I still do like what they have. It just wasn't their night. And maybe Boston is not a really good matchup. So if they're not a good matchup, how good of a matchup will Milwaukee be? Now we'll see. I'm not quite sure who will start yet. Is it going to be Pat Connaughton or Grayson Allen?
Pat Connaughton's out. He's not playing.
Pat Connaughton is out, right? Okay.
Yeah, he's out.
So,
yeah.
Grayson Allen, Wesley Matthews, are they going to start? And then you have David Waba, who's out there as a reserve player. We'll see. I don't know, but maybe that was a bad matchup for them where Boston just might be a problem for the Sixers. Who knows? It's only game number 1, but maybe that's the case because Boston has had the Sixers number in general for last couple of seasons and when they match up against one another. But Milwaukee is also a tough opponent. So very curious to see. And again, I also want to see how they perform when out there with Embiid, who's not in foul trouble, when they have an opportunity to play with him, when he is still upright, good to go, not in any trouble, and see how things develop there for that bench. But a 34-11 disadvantage there in game number one is not ideal for the Philadelphia 76ers. So it's very important for them to make sure that they bounce back tonight against the Milwaukee Bucks and help secure this first win of the season. They were brought here for a reason. I think it will all come together, and I can't wait to find out tonight how they do play against this Milwaukee team when they do come in and check in for the game. Did you have any problem with the rotation of the players coming in outside of Matisse Thybulle? As far as who played,
my problem, my biggest concern was, and I understand, like, I mean, I get it. You bring in these guys and they are going to play. I mean, let's face it, they're going to play. I just think that there comes a time when you just got to make some adjustments, right? And like the Matisse thing was big to me that he had to play. Now, again, you do expect certain players to produce, but I feel like in a game where you need two things, you need a bona fide scorer, that's Shake Milton, and you need a lockdown defender, that's Matisse. And unfortunately, they can't be the same. They're not the same guy,
I
right?
don't know if Shake Milton is a bona fide scorer. He has that
I
label.
think he is. I think he is off the bench. I do. I think the problem. I think Shake. Look, we got to understand something. Shake was a dude who was a two-way guy, who second round pick, right? This and that. I think off the bench, he can fulfill that role. I think that the problem is that the Sixers roster has been so jacked up in the past that we tried to turn, or people tried to turn him into something he's not. And he wouldn't be in the NBA if it wasn't for getting buckets. I think that's what he can do. He can get buckets to a point where he dropped 30 on Doc. I know it's a problem, but then all of a sudden the Sixers tried to turn him into a point guard. So my thing is, when he can come in, he can get points. It's just that he has problems with other areas in his games. Matisse could come in and get buckets. What I'm saying is there were certain guys out there, and I get it, you got to play through it. But when you're playing a game like this and guys aren't giving you what you expect them to do, sometimes you got to look down at that bench and be like, yo, we're going to go with this guy for the night.
No,
and
I don't disagree with that. Yeah, well, you need a spark. This guy might be one. Shake might come in and give them 12 points off the bench. Now, you're absolutely right. Can he score? Sure, we've seen it. It hasn't been consistent. That's where I guess more of where when you say, you know, he's a scorer that can come in and get it done. I mean, we've seen it sometimes, but I've also seen it where it's been a little more questionable to Shake Milton's game and him out there getting those buckets as you talk about. So we'll see. I mean, but they can use it. Maybe tonight is the night they do call his number, and as we always talk about, hey, it's about time and opportunity and feel. And when he decides, Doc Rivers, to call somebody's number, and those guys have to be ready, plain and simple.
Yeah, the one thing. This is the one thing I would just a little confusing thing to me was there were certain guys and certain player in preseason games who had certain roles, and you expected maybe to translate a little bit, and it just didn't. You know what I mean? Like, you know, in the preseason, it was one of those things where, you know, Shake was one of the first guys off the bench. You know what I mean? And he probably had more shot attempts than any other person off the bench, you know. But then it just, to me, it's just, I get it. You know, sometimes you try to figure out what teams are doing, but this one was based off of what they did in the preseason. It gave you no indication of what was happening, none. Because go ahead.
No, I wonder when you say Shake Milton, one of the first off the bench in the preseason versus what we saw in game one had to do with who was coming off the bench for Boston, where Malcolm Brogdon can, you know, out-muscle him, out-physical him a little bit. Defensively, can Shake stand up to Malcolm Brogdon? Probably not. Even though he has that wingspan, defense is not his forte. As you said, he comes in, he gets buckets. So I wonder if it was more of a matchup thing because Melton seemed like the better call than Shake in game number one when it came to Malcolm Brogdon. That could change tonight. Could be totally different. Javon Carter, though, is a dog. He's nonstop. He's not an offensive guy, but he's going to dig in the Shake if that's the call that they want to go with, and maybe he feels like Melton can handle that a little bit better as a guy off the bench.
I agree. But what all I'm saying is that goes down to adjustments.
Yes.
Adjustments. Because I get that. But then there comes down to adjustments because, if someone is not giving you what you need or something like that, then you just got to bring in a spark sometimes. You know what I mean? My concern was I just felt like they weren't making the adjustments that needed to be made. Now, again, they were in there balling with them. I mean, it's to their defense, it was 63-63 at the half, right?
Yep.
And whatchamacallit went off on the third quarter. Tatum.
Yep.
I get all that, but it came down to a point when you needed someone to give you a shot. The guys off the bench shot 30.7%.
Yep, absolutely. The other guard that they do have, I already mentioned Grayson Allen coming off the bench. I forgot George Hill is still there. And we already mentioned Wes Matthews, Jordan Nwora, and Marjan Beauchamp, your guy from the G League. He's on the roster as a rookie, and AJ Green is one of the other guards that they have on this roster coming off the bench. So see who they start in place of Chris Middleton. See who gets those minutes. I'd imagine that George Hill and Javon Carter will also be in the mix with Grayson Allen as part of their backcourt rotation tonight against the Sixers. The big guys, though, the stars, Giannis, Embiid. We need to talk about them. Their matchup tonight. I'm sure they'll face off a few times this evening. It's always a big-time matchup, especially nationally televised game. Sure, that'll be the job of Brook Lopez. But seeing those two match up tonight, we'll talk about it next right here, Locked On 76ers. Welcome back, Locked On 76ers. Hope you enjoyed that pretty soothing and cool music. That's Keith Pompey. I'm Devon Gibbons. We're here on Locked On 76ers, previewing the Sixers Bucks tonight, live from the center, the new Penn Medicine Court at the center. Keith, got a new name and all that stuff, man. Penn Medicine Court at the center. So that's tonight, 7:30, nationally televised game here in town as we get ready for another matchup in the league between two top stars. And I know one thing that always jumps out for you is the international guys and their star power in this league. But we'll get to that, of course. But also, what are you looking for tonight from these two guys going head to head? Game one for Giannis and game two for Embiid. And as you already mentioned, it was more of an eye test thing. He didn't play as well in game number one.
I'm expecting to see Joel Embiid to come out on fire. I mean, so to speak. Here's the thing. We're talking about two of arguably the top five guys in the league, right? They're both internationals, and you can make an argument that four of the top five guys, Luka Doncic and Nikola Jokic included, are international players. You know what I mean? And then you could pick Kevin Durant, LeBron James, anybody else you want to put in there, but you can argue that those four guys are among the top five guys in the league. I look at it like, Embiid typically has a tough matchup against this team just because of Brook Lopez on the defensive end with Embiid. Lopez likes to go and play in the perimeter, and I feel like he gets Embiid in no man land a little bit, and he gets a couple threes. But outside of that, I enjoy watching him when he's paired up against Giannis. They go at it. You can tell that they have a really good friendship. There's times when we go on the road in Milwaukee, and you'll see after the game, Giannis, his son, his girlfriend, walk past the Sixers locker room, and they'll see Embiid and the whole nine. And it's kind of like seeing a family friend. Like, it's that type of love. But I honestly think that it's going to be something, and it's one of those things where we can't forget about 2 years ago. Giannis comes here, he makes the game-winning shot, and what does he do? He goes and he takes a seat near at the foul line in front of the Sixers bench.
The
You
fans
understand?
were not happy about that one,
Yeah,
man.
yeah. The fans weren't happy, but but I like seeing stuff like that, because even though that Embiid and Giannis are good friends, there's that competitive juice, right?
Mhm.
And I think that we're going to see that tonight. Now, if I think we're going to see that, at least early on. We're going to see that. There may be some other things to pay attention to if the Sixers get down big, but outside of that, I think that we're going to see a nice budding rivalry, even though they play different positions, but a budding rivalry between two of the league's elite players.
Yeah, I like to see both of them when they match up together. Oftentimes, as you mentioned, it's the Brook Lopez part of it where Embiid has to guard him. He's a center. You don't want him out on the perimeter with Giannis as much. That's where the whole fun of Ben Simmons being on this roster with Embiid together. He could defend, to a certain extent. He could do an okay job with Giannis until that brute force just took over on the low block and would get the better of Simmons. But it was the matchup and how they would go, because now I'm imagining that PJ Tucker might get that call tonight, or Tobias Harris might get that call tonight as far as the matchups go against Milwaukee, because you don't want to be, again, getting in foul trouble, pardon me, against this team tonight for a second consecutive game. So I do like when they match up against one another. And you're right. Look, the four guys from Jokic to Doncic to Embiid and Giannis, two super talented players that are, foreign-born players coming over to the league and just making their mark. All of them with Hall of Fame candidacy. We know multi-time All-Stars and MVPs already in their own right. So this is going to be a fun one. It always is. We expect Milwaukee, Boston, and Philadelphia to be up at the top. There were some good surprising wins in the East last night where Chicago took down Miami. Toronto got a good win against the Cleveland Cavaliers. So all of these teams, Atlanta won, these teams that we talked about being in the mix, the Sixers are going to be right there, I think, with these two teams in Boston and Milwaukee. And in the end, it's going to come down to their stars. And Embiid and Giannis, we get this matchup tonight. It's going to be a fun one. I know the place is going to be nuts in there. They have Sixers regular season basketball back, looking at this team. And it will be a really big win for the Sixers if they can get this one done this evening against Giannis and company. He poses a big problem, as we know. He poses a big problem. But Embiid poses a big problem for them, too. That's why he is who he is, two-time runner-up in the MVP candidacy the last two seasons. This is going to be a fun matchup tonight. So before we step away, Keith, talking about the rest of the league a little bit, we mentioned already Miami falling to Chicago at home. That was a big win for Chicago. No Zach LaVine, no Lonzo Ball. DeMar DeRozan leads them to a victory. Really, really good job by him beating the Miami Heat. Also, again, Toronto taking down the Cleveland Cavaliers. They had their full complement of players. Darius Garland did get hurt in the game, but Donovan Mitchell had a pretty big scoring performance, falling, though, to the Toronto Raptors, and the Atlanta Hawks picking up a win with their new lineup with DeJounte Murray in the mix. Also wanted to take a peek at what happened in Brooklyn. We talk about them being that team, and they lost yesterday in a big way, man. It wasn't close. I watched some of that after the Phillies game before I had to head to work and head into the studio. And look, that New Orleans Pelicans team gave it to the Nets. And in particular, Zion Williamson gave it to Ben Simmons.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, I mean, Zion really, that's a bad matchup for Ben. Because you remember 2 years ago, it was like, was it? Yeah, 2 years ago when the Sixers were in the bubble.
Right.
not the bubble, but they played in the empty arena, so to
Yeah.
speak. And Zion gave Ben the business, gave Joel the business, and gave Tobias the business, right? But in a way, you expect Zion to get his, but you don't expect Brooklyn to get clobbered like that. You know what I mean? Like the score was what? It was like 10, it was 102 to 89. You know, so I mean, and then you look at Ben Simmons'
It
line.
wasn't even that close
Yeah,
as I
exactly.
was watching it.
You know, I mean, Ben Simmons, what he
4
had more
points,
fouls
5
than points.
rebounds, 5 assists, 6 fouls, 23 minutes.
Exactly, 6 fouls in 23 minutes. So, like, to me, that was a disappointing start. Now, he did say he might have been a little bit too hyped up or whatever, but
That's yeah, come on.
it's like you look at this starting lineup. I mean, you got Kevin Durant, Royce O'Neal, Nick Claxton, Kyrie Irving, Ben Simmons. I mean, you don't expect them to you don't expect them to lose to New Orleans the way they did, but it happened. I mean, they got blown away, man. They really got blown
Yeah.
away. I mean, well, 130, 108. It was bad. 130 to
Kevin
108.
Durant looked good. Kyrie Irving did not look good. Ben Simmons looked terrible. And the rest of them really don't matter in this case. Plus, Joe Harris, Seth Curry did not play. But as far as Ben's performance, and I know we pretty much leave it alone now, but it was game one. It was first game back since that playoff game against the Atlanta Hawks. He just simply did not look good. He looked like Ben Simmons in most of the things that he did, but there was just no pep to his step. There was no jump to his game. Him saying he was too excited, he didn't look it. I'm not buying that comment right there. I was probably a little too excited. It didn't show, and I know he's not one to show emotion, but he shows it based on his performance, and his performance was terrible. He couldn't defend Zion Williamson. Others were getting a good leg up on him and getting by him. You saw Brandon Ingram had some good shots in that game. Also, he played very well, and Ben Simmons just looked like Ben Simmons. And then I was reading some of the stuff that would pop up on the social media feed, and they would talk about, well, he didn't play for a year and some change. Well, Giannis, I was looking at the graphic, and the graphic said that he was out for like 500 days or something. I mean, 200, 300 days or whatever it was, but he was out more days than Ben Simmons, maybe about 20 more days. So they were both out for the same amount of time. And Giannis had like this fire lit underneath him where,
You're not Giannis. You're talking about my
I
man
mean,
from
Zion Williamson, pardon me. Thank you.
Zion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Zion had this fire lit underneath him that Ben Simmons just did not have, and it was evident in the game. And he looked like a lot of what we've seen before. Not looking at the basket, picking up his dribble 35 feet away, waiting to hand the ball off for somebody to come and take the basketball from him and set that screen, and it just kind of just drift around the perimeter. And next thing you know, on that one possession, as I was looking at it, when you know how he does it, he comes, let's say he gets to the 3-point line on the wing. He picks up his dribble because he's expecting somebody to come. It's not always on the player to come to get the basketball to say that's the reason why he picked up the dribble. You don't pick up your dribble unless you know you're actually giving it up. And I counted it. It took like 6 seconds off the shot clock. And you're already not getting across until you're at 18 to get 16 to get across the half court line, and that's 6 more seconds. They're already at 12, and now they have to get into their offense because he gave up his dribble. And it was just the typical stuff that we see from him. It was only game one for him too. I do expect him to be better. He's going to have his really good days. That was
Yeah.
not a great debut for the Brooklyn Nets and Ben Simmons.
I understand.
Yeah. Yeah, so tough one for them. But hey, we'll see when the 22nd hits of November and they come to town and take on the Philadelphia 76ers. Yes, we'll monitor stuff around the league. We will, because we are basketball fans, and that's what we do. The Knicks took the Memphis Grizzlies to overtime but fell in that game. Cam Reddish went off in that one. I don't get the whole Cam Reddish thing. He's super talented. He can score in a big way, and he had a big number on Wednesday. I don't get how he just gets lost like that, but we'll see how it all progresses for the Knicks. Thanks for making Locked On 76ers your first listen today. That make your second listen. Locked On NBA. The NBA season is here, and our local NBA experts and insiders have you covered on and off the court all season long. All the biggest stories around the NBA every Monday through Friday in less than 30 minutes. Available right here on YouTube, Odyssey, and wherever you get your podcast. Keith, if you don't mind letting the good folks know where they can find us. Got a big game tonight.
Hey man, I'm gonna repeat what you just said. You can get us wherever you want to on YouTube, Odyssey, and you know what? Just listen to my man on the radio as well. You can listen to the Divine Giving show tonight. Every night it's normally from 6 to 10, but when the Sixers play is immediately after the game. So what you do is, soon as I'm telling you, you either when you in the arena, just put your headphones on, listen to it. If you're at the house, turn the TV off, listen to them, right? And then after that, you know what? Go to Twitter. You can follow my man D at Divine G975. You can follow me at Pompey on Sixers, and you can read my stuff on about the Sixers in the Philadelphia Inquirer.
Yeah, big game tonight, so make sure you tap in with Keith, of course, for all of his coverage. Appreciate it, Keith. Thanks, man. And we'll talk to everybody tomorrow as we recap what happens tonight at the Penn Medicine Court at the Center. Sixers Bucks game 2, first game at home. Let's see how they respond after that tough loss on Tuesday. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Have a good rest of your Thursday.
Peace.